Ladies and gentlemen, welcome or welcome back for the first time to the Electric Vibe podcast. My name is Kurt Hoffman. I'm your co-host, and my smooth, silky voiced brother from another mother to my left is none other than
J. David Silva, the Electric Man.
Jay. My favorite question of all time, especially when we're together like this on a Friday, September 13th, I might add, Friday the 13th, is who is our special guest today?
Kurt, on today's show, we welcome Harlan Hucky Austin, who for years has worked in the field of executive protection, guarding and protecting the musical artist Prince, as well as a host of other notable celebrities and dignitaries. Now, throughout his distinguished career, Hucky has become known for his professionalism and his practical, no nonsense approach to executive protection, making him one of the most respected individuals in the industry. The Electric Vibe is happy to welcome Harlan Hucky Austin.
Yay. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Harlan Hucky Austin. Hucky,
What's
thanks for
up? What's
coming on the
up?
Electric Vibe. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man. And in honor of your fantastic post about one of the luminaries of Black
Um,
culture and music, we're playing some Frankie Beverly and Mays in the background for you, man.
I appreciate that, man. What an impact he's had on Black culture, and not just
Yes.
Black culture. I just think that people who love R&B music, period. But I can certainly tell you, I can't ever remember not going to a summer function, barbecue, a wedding, and not hearing Frankie.
Mm,
So salute to Frankie, and I like to say it, the ode to a dead guy, and he's certainly owed that.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and we were talking earlier on the phone about this before coming on, and him, you put him right up there on a pedestal with the rest of the luminaries in black music,
Yeah,
and he's just one of those. Anytime I'm in a horrible mood, it's either him or it's Reverend Al Green.
right.
That is my magic elixir when I'm in a crappy mood. It just I put those guys on, and it just turns everything around.
Well, for me, I'm a child of the 70s and more of an adult in the 80s. Just the impact that his music had on myself and my generation. As I said in my post, I would argue that no one else in R&B has had that type of impact. This, and my wife, we had this running joke, guys. It's like we said, man, Frankie ain't put out a hit in 20 years, and he's still as popular today as he was in 1985 or 86. And so I think that says a lot about the impact of his music.
Sure does.
I regret I've never seen him live, and all the years that he came to Baltimore and played at the Pier Six Pavilion right there by the water, by the Chesapeake in downtown Baltimore. I mean, even though he's a Philly guy, Baltimore adopted him as their own as well.
Okay.
And God, I mean,
Well, Kirk, I said it in the post. So we didn't get a lot of shows, especially R&B artists back in the day when I was growing up. And so Frankie, his loop, it totally, Jay, you might get it totally like it missed. It go up to Kansas City, and maybe once in a while Denver would get a couple hits, and then they go back up. So we ain't going to Minneapolis. We're gonna dip down and go to Milwaukee, then to Chicago, Gary and stuff. So we always missed out. And so I'm from Kansas City, Missouri originally.
sir.
And if I didn't see him in my hometown, then I didn't get a chance to connect. But I finally seen him, Kirk, in 2006 at the Essence Festival. And that was the year that he got moved to Houston because of Katrina.
Katrina.
And
Yeah.
so that was really my first time. So I was really kind of a late bloomer as far as being able to see him live. And I would be so envious because relatives and because he seemed to have this southern tour loop. Frankie would do New Orleans, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, maybe go to Jacksonville,
Right.
maybe Miami, then hit back on up and do it again. But he never made it up. He never made it to the Midwest. So
Yes. Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, the fact that, like you said, I think of Morris Day in the Time because they, apart from the original Seven album that they did, they're touring off a back catalog that's decades old,
Yeah.
and they really don't need to put anything else out because the songs that they have are just as good as they were 40 year 30 40 years ago,
Yeah.
you know. Uh so we find you at home tonight, and you're doing okay, you're doing well.
So I was talking to you earlier, just kind of on day 5 of COVID.
Mm,
Uh, and so, I'm feeling okay. My voice is a little hoarse, but I'm good. Man, that first 24 hours is a little rough. Body was aching, but not much to complain about. I was talking to my wife tonight. I was like, man, do you remember before the shots and the boosters and stuff like that? And I had it back then. And regardless of how you feel about boosters or whatever, I can tell you for me, it was a huge difference in getting COVID now than what it was the
mm.
first time. I remember that vividly, and it was not fun. And I never ever want to go through another experience like that. But yeah, thank you for asking. I'm doing fine.
Good, good.
Great.
And I know this has been, a bit in the making, and we're very grateful for you taking the time, to come on the podcast and talk with us. You had mentioned, growing up in Kansas City. Can you take us a little bit through, your upbringing, your teenage years before we kind of get into your career and things like that?
I'm glad you asked. I sure can. There's a book on that coming out.
Yes,
Yes,
there is.
we want to talk about that too.
Yeah, well, there's several books. They just got to get completed. That's the whole deal. But anyway, that's another time. My mother was a single mother, um, and she had 2 children that she had, and we lived in Kansas City, Missouri. And my mother was looking for a better opportunity, and her father had moved to Minneapolis years ago, and he had been trying to get her to come to Minneapolis. He said, you know what, there's just so much more to offer. Just give it a shot. And so she left everything that she knew, her family, um, and friends, and she came to Minneapolis and gave it a shot. And I tell her, or I told her before she passed away, which was a couple of years ago, I'm really glad, Mom, that you made that decision. It was a great decision. She met an amazing man that adopted my younger brother Ronnie and myself, and took us on as his own. And that's really where my story started. So we moved up here in the early 70s, Jay, and there's a lot to talk about, and that probably could be a podcast all by itself. But so that's how we got here to Minneapolis.
And more specifically, he's from Union City, Pennsylvania.
He is Uniontown, yeah. And so I
Uniontown.
have a book called Kansas City Kid to World Traveler. And this book isn't intended to sell. It was just something that I wanted to do for my legacy. I wanted to have my grandbabies and my kids. I wanted them to know something about myself and my family. And so that's why this is taking a little bit longer. But one of the chapters is called The Man from Pennsylvania. And Kurt, in line with your point, my father, I acknowledge him as my father, even though he's my stepdad.
Right.
He's from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and that's outside of Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
And in the chapter, I talk about he walks up to my mom and my grandfather, who had a local nightclub, and he says, "Hello, my name is Ron Austin. I'm from Uniontown, Pennsylvania." And I always give him a lot of heck. I was like, "Who in the world does that? Who goes up and meets someone for the first time and says I'm from Pennsylvania, California, Florida?" Well, my dad, Ron Austin, did. So yeah, he made that known right away, and I'll share the chapter with you. I think you guys will find it to be interesting, but he got a kick out of it.
Well, I had the honor and privilege. You had actually shared with me the first 7 chapters of that book, which I had passed on to Jay actually.
You
So
must
that
be special.
yes, yes. I've listen, and not making light of that. I felt a very 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 honored and privileged to read your story and how you got your nickname Hucky from Huckleberry Hound,
Mhm.
and all the different things in your life. Um, but uh, you know, when you go look at the trajectory of your life and the various father figures that come into play in your life, um, your Uncle Steve, right? Who would woo the future mayor of Minneapolis later down the road,
Hmm.
Sharon Sayers Belton. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, someone's done their homework.
Yeah,
Um, I'll say that. Yeah, my uncle Steve was and still is married to Sharon Belton, Sharon Sayers Belton, who's mine, and she was the first first woman mayor of Minneapolis and the first African American
yeah.
mayor. So um, Stephen's very special to me, and so is Sharon. They're amazing people. Um, but I think Kirk, I'm just trying to think of what chapters you may have looked at, but you talked about men. It sounds like you were talking or trying to get to people or men who have had an influence in my life.
Your
And
various uncles. Yeah.
yeah, Stephen definitely is one. I have another uncle named Robert that just passed this year that was really close and special to me. But my grandfather's was certainly a huge influence. Ron Austin, and I named a chapter after him, the man from Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and Charles Big Chick Huntsberry, and lastly Prince. And so, out of all the men that I've had significant roles in my life, those are the ones that stand out.
That's great. Hucky, now can you talk about like your formative years, high school? I know you played football. Can you take us through kind of the years growing into a man?
Sure. And I can even give you a timeline with that, Jay, on how I got connected with Prince or how I began to check out his music and just really take notice of him. But I remember it vividly. I was in a ninth grade art class, and this girl by the name of Nanette Smith, she was playing one of Prince's songs. And I remember saying, "Who's that girl?" And he's like, "That's not a girl. That's a guy, and his name is Prince." I was like, "That's a girl." And anyway, so she played this music, and I thought I really wasn't feeling it. I was more in the Earth, Wind, and Fire, Confunction, Ohio Players, and Slave, but it was okay. And so I remember that was really the first time that I was introduced to Prince, and that was ninth grade at Ramsey Junior High. But I really wasn't into music in the sense of I wasn't a musician, and I can tell you a disastrous story with my buddy Brown, Mark, real name Mark Brown. But Mark
Mm-hmm.
had a band when we were in seventh and eighth grade, and because we were so close, he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get Huck to learn how to play guitar." And so I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he's like, "Yep, we're gonna make you a guitar player." And fellas, it only took like about 6 hours, and he's like, "Nope, you can't do it." And so he gave up on that. And I have a saying that I love music, but music don't love me back. So I played sports. And I was a pretty good football player. And I played football from, when I was a pee-wee football all the way up to college. And so high school was pretty mundane, just like for any teenager. The one thing that's significant for me when I think about high school is I met the love of my life, Toya, there,
Oh,
and she's my high school sweetheart.
oh wow.
And 38 years later, we're still together, and we had our challenges. I think she'll be the first to admit that, but um, I met her back then, and and it was because of that relationship, Jay, that we had in high school that after I got out on the road with Prince and seeing all the things that I seen, that I just wanted somebody that I felt was real,
Mhm.
somebody that was in my corner, and somebody that wasn't superficial but wanted me for who I was. So I went to a high school in South Minneapolis. It's a middle class neighborhood, Washburn High School. Go Millers, yay, 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 yay. And then I went to a junior college in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota, which, if you went straight east from Chanhassen and Paisley Park, 30 miles, 40 miles later, you would run into Inver Grove Heights, which is where I went to college at. And yeah, that's kind of my educational timeline there, Jay.
Okay.
You and Mark Brown have known each other since the fourth grade, and this is years before he even worked for Prince.
Yeah, fourth
So
and fifth grade. So Mark and I both were Jehovah's Witnesses, and
mhm.
so that's how we met each other. I remember at a local congregation. Kirk, don't take any offense to this, but this is like, here's two little black boys, and we just naturally gravitated because we were the only black boys in the whole congregation. I'm like, there's no black people here. What's going on? Because I was raised as in the Baptist, and so we're Southern Baptists, and so
Yeah,
that was kind of a culture shock, coming from Kansas City, Missouri, and
I
coming
bet.
from a faith that was 100% black to this. It was very different, and so me and Mark naturally connected, and we have been buddies ever since then. Road dogs, as we like to say amongst each
Absolutely.
other.
Absolutely. Now, I find it interesting that you were both in the Jehovah's Witness faith. This is decades before Prince was even on the scene, and many
Right.
years later, in his life, in his timeline, he would later become a Jehovah's Witness himself with the influence of Larry Graham. Had you ever talked about your faith with Prince prior to that?
I did. We had a couple conversations throughout the years. So there's a particular scripture that I like to use, Psalms 83:18. And the scripture is that men may know that whose name is Jehovah, you alone are the most high over all the earth. So Prince had this huge Bible in his office. And so I would go into his office, guys, constantly and always turn that scripture. And so one day he says, who's been in my office and keeps turning my Bible to Psalms 83:18? And I got all scared and quiet and stuff like that. He never did find out that it was me, but we had a
Wow.
couple conversations, yeah, over the years.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
You know, Hucky, I'm really interested in, obviously we need to talk about the Prince connection and, how you came up to be the protector, but I'm really interested in your relationship with Big Chick Huntsberry.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
can we talk
So,
about that?
hey man, he was like my second father, man. An amazing person. Just like all of us, he had his flaws, but he took great care and really brought me and Gilbert underneath his wing and treated us like his kids. And so the first time that I had met him, I used to go out to rehearsal with Mark, and I would hang out. And I remember, meeting Chick for the first time, and he's just trying to get to know me. And he's like, "Well, what are you going to do in life?" Excuse me. And I said, I want to play pro football. And so this dude looks at me and says, "Oh, you're too slow to play pro football." I'm like, "How can you tell if I'm fast or slow by just looking at me?" He's like, "Oh, I just know." I didn't have anything to do with weightlifting at the time or strength training. And I'm sure we'll talk more about executive protection
Absolutely.
and what that means and what that is. Excuse me. But at the time, I thought that it was a term called bodyguarding. And the only thing that I knew was bodyguards were just these big guys, these big mindless monsters.
Mm.
And so in my mind, to be a successful bodyguard, you have to lift weights. And so they were getting ready to go on the 1999 tour. And so I wanted to be a part of this because Mark was doing it, and he would come back from tour telling me all these amazing stories. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. So I worked out all summer, got big, got some bulk. I think I went from 190 pounds to 220. And, I was a pretty ripped and muscular young man back in the day. And so when Chick came back, he said, you want to do this. And so that's kind of how we kind of connected. And Chick gave me some good opportunities. I mean, I was just talking to somebody a couple of days ago, Jay, about my first trip, my first detail, going out to Los Angeles by myself at 21 years old, right off the turnip truck, not knowing anything about coast protection, not knowing anything about how to protect somebody, let alone myself. But Chick had enough faith in me, that he felt that I was the right person and I could do the job. And so very special. Like I said, took me and Gilbert in as his boys. And Chick was, I hope his girls don't get mad at me, but this is he would tell me this, but he would say, I'm just an old hillbilly from Tennessee. He spent some time in Tennessee. I know Tina's probably gonna fuss at me and say, we're not from Tennessee, we're from Ohio. I can't remember. But that's what he would say. But he was good people, man, for
Right.
sure.
That's Oh,
So
wow.
did you actually were you there for the Rolling Stones gig that Prince opened
No, I
up for?
wasn't.
Okay.
Mark, I got firsthand report from my boy Mark, but
I'm
I
sure you
wasn't.
did.
Yeah.
Hucky, you had said something a moment ago about going out to Los Angeles at 21 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
that young. I mean, what was going through your head at the time? I mean, you said you didn't know, protecting someone,
Yeah,
let alone
there's
yourself.
old saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, okay.
And so I just wrote an article recently. Another guy, another mentor, Murray Levy. He was Prince's limousine driver, but he was really much more than that. For me, he was another older person that had been around in the rock and roll business. And I got to tell you guys, if it wasn't for him, I would have without doubt failed on my first security detail. I just wrote an article not too long ago on my website, and he picked us up at the airport, Prince and I, and this is so cool. I call him the James Bond of chauffeuring, just smooth, silky, this was a very elegant man. And so he says to me as I'm in the front of the limousine, um, did you reach out to the hotel security? No. Oh, I'm sure you just have a whole lot of things to do and you probably just didn't think about that. And he was just so kind. And
Hmm.
truth be told, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I mean, Chick had confidence in me, but he didn't really give me the tools that I needed to be successful on my first detail. And it wasn't because, he didn't care. He was just burnt out, and Chick was in a very, very challenging point, a time in his life. And so Murray, man, he took my hand. He basically just gave me everything that I needed. He told me what to do. And one of the things we do in close protection is we do what's called advanced work. And advanced work really is making sure you understand what you're getting ready to get yourself into. You understand what risks are out there. And so he understood that. I connected with hotel security and I was able to do a walkthrough of the venue while Prince was in the car being entertained, and Murray helped me to do that. But if it wasn't for him, man, I gotta tell you,
Hmm.
it probably wouldn't have went so well. So, but my first time to LA, just like my first time to New York, I remember it. People don't think of Minnesota as being country, but it really is. Minneapolis was nothing more than a big country town in the 80s until Prince put it on the map. And in LA was just fast. Everything was so flashy,
Hmm.
so exciting, so sexy.
Mhm.
And here I am, this young kid thrown in the middle of this. And I've always been good at adapting. And so, and in this particular case, you didn't have any other choice. Either adapt or go home.
Yep. So,
So
Hucky,
take it. So if you're not doing advanced work, Hockey, and you're actually in the thick of doing the bodyguard duty, take us through an average day. I say
So
average, but a typical day, close protecting Prince. Let's
sure.
say day before a gig or something like
Yeah.
that, and you're with him.
Yeah, let me just give you guys a couple of things to give you some clarity on this work. Executive protection, close protection, bodyguarding, no matter what you want to call it, it's 99% boredom, 1% sheer mitigated terror. We're constantly preparing for that 1%.
Mhm.
And so on an average day, which is good, there's not a whole lot going on. But as you know, those saying, when it hits the fan, you better be ready.
Yep.
You better be ready to perform. You better be ready to make sure that you can get your client, what we call off the X, out of a bad situation as soon as possible. Cover and evacuate are the models of any true professional in the industry. Get your client out of danger as soon as possible. And so that's where advanced work really comes in. And so, you know, my career, a lot of that was just learning from experience, on the job training, on really understanding the industry. But advanced work is really the bread and butter of the industry, because if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, I don't need to tell you gentlemen what the challenges or problems that they can cause. You can't trust venue security to a degree. You can't trust hotel security. You better go out there and make sure with your own eyes that you understand what you're about to get yourself into. Can't tell you how many times hotel security was supposed to meet us at the loading dock, and we get out and there's paparazzi out there, and I only need to go up to open up the door, and the door's locked. And it's like, wait a minute, somebody's supposed to be here. And so if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, if you're not running routes, over and over and over again, you're going to have problems.
Mm.
And so what does a day look like? Well, depends on what area or what part of executive protection you're focused on. If you're in corporate um, executive protection, if you're doing celebrity, it's all different. If you're doing high risk stuff over in the sandbox, known as Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan, there's
Mm-hmm.
a whole lot going on now, like it was in the 90s and stuff when Blackwater was operating, but
Yeah.
it's very different. And so an average day for me with P would be is that, we get into a city, we go right to the venue, and we'd start the sound checks. And he'd run sound checks right up until it was time to open up the doors. And most of the time, he would run back to the hotel. He'd get something light to eat. And then we would turn back around and we'd come to the venue. And then we get ready for the show. We do the show. And then right after the show, we go back to the hotel. He would eat. And then he would watch VHS video, whatever you want to call it at the time. Every night he would watch the show. And then he'd call in band members to talk about it or whatever. And then we'd go to the club and we'd do an after show and he'd play to 3 or 4 in the morning. And then we'd come back and you got up and you got ready to go to the next city.
Mm.
And so when you're doing advanced, which is what I really preferred, and I think that especially as you get older, not a lot of people in this industry really want to be on the principal. That's usually a young man's game. Principals are demanding, they take a lot of energy. And, for me, and I don't do as much work as I used to, I much rather just be by myself. And so doing advanced work, you get an opportunity to do that. So the advanced guy, you get up, you go to the city. I'd get in before noon. I'd go to the hotel. I'd do my whole hotel check, get my hotel checklist off, and I'd run through that. Then I'd go to the venue, check out the venue, run that checklist off. And then I would run a couple routes just to make sure that if there's any issues with traffic, anything like that, we're prepared. And then I'd go pick up Prince, and at the time Gilbert would be with him, and I would bring them right over to the venue. So that's what my day looked like. Depending on how many days we were in a city, it would be 6 to 7 days a week. People was like, when do you sleep? I was like, you sleep when you can. So uh, I got real good at sleeping in airport chairs. And if you travel a lot, you know how tough that is. But when you're
Oof.
tired, deprived of sleep, you can sleep anywhere. So
Oh,
excuse me for a long dissertation there. I know I started rambling.
no, that this is what we live for, Hucky. To hear it, and you told me that this has been a 2-year journey for you to come on a podcast where I was involved because you and I I got in contact with you about 2 years ago
See,
after hearing you on a podcast, and you're very engaging and very knowledgeable and personable, talking about the subject. But it to get to know you outside of the whole Prince thing, there's a whole other world there, to explore. Um, you and I got in touch. I got in touch with you, and of all places, about bourbon, one of our enthusiastic subjects, I might add. And I salute you, sir. I salute you.
Good spirit.
Little Blantons.
oh boy, look at you.
Yeah, well, it's Friday too, Hockey. So we gotta represent. But you and I talked about bourbons because you were looking for a particular varietal, and I was able to help out with that. Um, but
So can I,
I didn't grill you about Prince and stuff like that,
yeah,
and how we came into each other's orbit was over just
and I'd like to address that. And
please.
so I get a lot of people that reach out to me through Messenger. And I think I was even sharing this with you earlier, Kurt.
Yeah.
There have been people that have been upset with me over the years because I don't respond. And number one, they reach me, that's not the best platform to do so. If you really wanted to get a hold of me, you didn't have my personal information. LinkedIn would probably be a much better choice, but I don't really respond to Messenger. And when I do get messages on Messenger, most of the time it's stuff like, what was Prince like? And how many did this and how many of that? And, you know, those are things that can be turnoffs for a lot of us.
Mhm.
And so the thing that I really appreciated about you, Kurt, is that you didn't say anything about Prince. You just started talking about whiskey, which automatically got my antenna up. Said, oh, okay, let's have a conversation. And so I appreciate that, because I think people lose, they don't focus on this, is that although we were privileged and had an opportunity to be around, in my mind, probably one of the greatest musicians of all time.
Yep.
And we witnessed a lot of stuff. I certainly did. But when somebody shows you that they appreciate who you are or are willing to get to know you a little bit more, it goes a long way. And so people that are in my circle are always going to respond better when people come at us like that.
Sure. Well, you were so giving and sharing on a previous podcast with Michael Dean. I'll put his name out there because he's been doing the Purple podcast circuit for a long time, and shout out to him and a lot of respect to Michael. But you shared a lot with him,
Mm.
and I don't know how I found out you like bourbon. Somebody had posted something. You were on some bourbon page, and I went, "Wait a minute, that's how." Oh, and I said, "You're looking for Buffalo Trace, but I think it had something to do with Buffalo Trace products." And I said, "Oh, okay, this dude likes bourbon. Okay, let's talk about that." And it wasn't just to get to the information about Prince, but it was like, hold on, because I know a little bit about I'm in the wine and spirits industry. And let's talk about that because, we all, common interests and what have you, and that's what got us off on a trajectory. Fast forward to June, early June of, I think it was June 9th or 10th of 2022. um you had taken me to one of your favorite spots, Ace Liquors, and we
Mm.
went to and we went and looked around, and I got a few bottles, and it was a lot of fun. You know a lot. You knew a lot about the stuff, and I got invited to one of your friends' homes.
Mm.
I mean, I felt really honored and privileged for that too. And here I am, this stranger. All these guys like, so Hucky, we're sampling all different kinds of bourbon at your one of your friends' houses, and like, how did you two meet? And it was a really great. And I was going to Paisley Park the next day for a tour, and it just it really enhanced my whole trip. Just talking around the guys, and you guys were sharing stories. You had your friend Austin there,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
I shared some stories about the Love Sexy tour and Mr. Armani. And
Sure.
and I never once asked about any of that. Uh, but the stories were coaxed just on a natural basis, and that's the whole idea. Is look, if
Sure.
you want to share stuff about Prince, great. If you don't, great. You
Can I,
know,
can I chime in on that just very
yeah,
quickly?
please.
Like, I appreciate what you're saying. One of the things that Kurt and I were committed to doing was when we did this podcast, and we have all different types of individuals on, so it's not just entertainment, it's finance and insurance, and we want to be very, very well rounded. But one of the things that we always were very keen on not being was the hangers on, and the groupies and all that, because when it comes to us having a conversation right now, I'm much more fascinated by your life, your role, your no nonsense and practical approach to executive protection outside of Prince. I remember reading an article that you did about the proper footwear, and I
Mm.
remember things that lay people wouldn't think about.
Right.
while you're working all day, not having the proper footwear, and to something that you said earlier, people think it's all flash and dash and glitz and glamour, but the no nonsense approach and the practical application that you put on the craft is really what fascinates me, not who you were protecting or even some of the wildly crazy stories, but just the dedication, first of all, to what you do,
Sure.
and second of all, the inside kind of tips that we normally wouldn't think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Was
I
there a
just think of
question?
when we had dinner together. When Jay, you and I were both, you and I, Hucky, went to the table first. And it's like when they say once a Marine, always a Marine,
Hmm.
once an executive protector, always an executive protector. When we went to the table, you assess the situation. Oh, no, no, Kurt, I'm going to sit here. And I
Yeah.
immediately said, oh, I know what. Okay. Because you're watching where the windows are and stuff like that. You already had strategically paced where
Yeah.
you were going to sit based on where you knew you could watch what was going on
Yeah.
for
And so
safety concern.
let me just, I love to talk about just a little bit about that. You're right. I mean, when you protect people for a living, there's just some things that are just going to be with you for the rest of your life. And so one of the things I was just talking to an individual in my current position right now, and believe it or not, I have a role in security. And I was just talking to her about situational awareness, and that's kind of a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I always tell people that the best tool that any civilian or any of us can have is situational awareness. And that's really the act of being in tune with your environment. If you can just be prepared for what could possibly go wrong, then you're going to put yourself in a much better position. And so, Kirk, getting along with what you going back to your point is that most protectors, that's what we do. We think about possible outcomes. And sometimes it's kind of a curse. I'll be honest. I can't go out with a dinner with my wife without thinking about 100 different scenarios and what I would do if it went crazy. But that's how my brain is wired. That's what happens when you protect people for your life.
Yeah,
Constantly thinking about what would I do if this happened and how will we get ourselves, off the X? How would I be able to cover and evacuate,
right.
my client? And when I go out with my wife, I always tell her, "You're my client tonight." Tell my grandbabies, "You're my client tonight." So yeah, man. So that's what you're gonna get.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I get it. When I was a educator, a music teacher for many years, and of course, the culture that we have where, we had to have active shooter drills
Yeah.
in an elementary school, middle school, high school, whatever. But I was an elementary music teacher. And in the wake of the culture that we had, really, especially post Columbine, we had to have, as a teacher, as an educator, you had to have a route and a plan. Where were you gonna, for your students, where were they gonna hide and stuff like that? And elementary students are not always the most well cooperative bunch of kids, bunch of group of people. And let me tell you, I, I don't know that I would have survived of shooting with some of these kids that were, you trying to get them quiet and in a corner where you're hidden. And, I had to think about all those things as well while I'm teaching music, while I'm, classroom managing and stuff like that. So I can appreciate when it's just a more prominent client, and the clients that you've had, and not just in music, but in politics and CEOs of businesses and stuff like that. That your brain is always thinking in all these different directions. So you know, it's a skill set that you've had to adapt. But I told you earlier. We were talking before coming on the interview here, Hucky, that you know the Purple Rain tour that you were involved in was equivalent to what Wendy of the Revolution said was like a moon landing. And these guys, in the band and the Revolution along Prince were astronauts going on board this like a moon mission. And you guys were an unprecedented environment at that time. 1984, 1985, we're talking in the 80s. That was, huge time for music. And if they were astronauts going on a moon mission, you were part of this mission control, along with Alan Leeds, the tour manager, and all these folks, Chick Huntsberry leading the security and all that. I mean, you were part of it. You talk about battleground training. I mean, this was an unprecedented moment in culture, pop culture. How anything after that Purple Rain tour must have paled in comparison, but your obligation to duty did not diminish.
Yeah. So, that's an interesting question, Kirk, because I remember so Purple Rain was my first tour. It was Gilbert Davison's first tour. And so I didn't appreciate that until many years. And so I remember Alan Lee. So Alan has been around the music industry forever. And, he really had an appreciation of what Purple Rain was. And I didn't, and Gilbert didn't because it was our very first. And I remember Alan's like, man, you young cats, y'all don't have no idea, you know, what you're involved in. And quite honestly, I was like, oh, so this is what a tour is like. Oh, all tours are going to be like this. Had no idea that no, all tours would not be like this. You weren't going to play at the Forum 7 nights in a row. You weren't going to have 25 trucks. So I didn't have a real appreciation for that until years later, a couple of years, Love Sexy. That's when it all
Oh,
started to come together. No slam on Love Sexy, because that was actually one of my favorite tours. But obviously, that was very different as far as popularity, the size of the tour and everything. Yeah, Gilbert, Wendy, and all us young bucks, we came in on this, huge monster, this huge machine. And we had no idea. We just thought like this was normal. It's like, oh, okay, this is what rock and roll is. Yeah, but Purple Rain it was a different beast.
yeah. You
Hucky,
mentioned, oh, sorry, Jay.
I'm sorry, one of the stories that you had said that I found very interesting was when you and I were talking a couple of months ago, was you were telling a story about, you did all this traveling, but you saw very little. Can you talk about that? I remember there was
Yeah,
one specific story you shared with me about the Eiffel
yeah.
Tower.
I just shared that story. So I play a game at work, and my role is one of my new roles. I work with new employees. And so we kind of do some icebreakers just to kind of get to know each other. And we played a game that some of you probably heard of, two truths and one lie.
Yeah.
And so, I give them these truths. And then I put in a lie. And so I always throw the Prince stuff in. And of course, it's like, because these people in my new life now, they don't know that I was a protector for Prince. And so I'll give you an example. One is I'll say that I lived in Paris, 2 blocks from the Champs-Élysées. I ate dinner with Prince, and then I'll give something else. And they always say the Prince stuff, of course, because most people can't even imagine that somebody in their midst would actually have spent some time um, with Prince. But getting back to your story, Jay, is that I had been to Paris about 4 times before I finally had an opportunity to go and see the Eiffel Tower, the Eiffel Tower. And
Mm.
this was before cell phones, even before pages. Man, I'm dating myself now. Uh, my life at that time was just waiting for Prince to decide what he wanted to do. And so we didn't have an opportunity. I was in these amazing cities, that had so much history and
Mm.
stuff. And I didn't get a chance to see that. And other people did in the entourage. Oh my God, we were in Prince had rented a castle in Shakespeare's hometown, and everybody else was around, out going and doing and seeing all these beautiful sights and stuff that Europe had to offer. But I didn't get a chance to see that. Gilbert didn't. I could tell you every nightclub in Europe at the time, but as far as any landmarks or any tourist destinations, we didn't see. And then also too, I was there to work. I was there to protect Prince, but everybody else was having an opportunity to have someone that they loved or cared about to be with them to experience this. And I didn't get an opportunity to do that. So,
Yeah.
my goal is to be able to revisit some of these places and spend and do it with people that I care about.
That was actually going to be my
Say that
next
I didn't care about Prince, but it was a different reason why I was there.
while you
Right.
were there. And my next question was going to be the impact that that type of work has on your family. I mean,
Yeah,
your
that's a great question. I just did an article not too long ago on burnout. And one of the things that I share with people who want to get in the field of executive protection, close protection, whatever you want to call it, is that you really need to give thought to the impact that this will have on your life. And specifically, Jay and Kirk, if you have a family, it's a huge impact on relationships because, let's just use, you know, the celebrity or the entertainment industry, you're out with an A-lister, you're out on the road 9 months, and yeah, you're going to see a lot, you're going to be involved in a lot that can have a huge impact on families. And for me, that was really the straw. I mean, I had a son, or I have a son, and at the time, my son was 2 years old, and he didn't know who his dad was, and I would hear all these stories with guys that had been on the road for years, and they would just tell these horror stories about their significant others raising their children and how many problems that was. And I didn't want that, but that's that's the that's a problem that a lot of people don't consider because all they see is what Hollywood feeds you. It's like, oh wow, this is so exciting. You're running around with celebrities, your hair is on fire, you're awesome and stuff like that, but they never show you the other side. And
Yeah.
one article I did was this burnout. And that's what happened with my mentor, Chick. He was a family man. He loved his family. He was in his 40s and stuff like that, and he got burnt
Mhm.
out. There's only so much you can do,
Yeah.
and you always think of protectors as being these mighty heroes, but we're humans too.
sure, sure.
Absolutely.
Lucky, is it when you were on the road, was it lonely?
No, absolutely. But you sign up for what you sign up for.
Mhm,
My job was to protect Prince, so it doesn't matter if I'm lonely. Matter of fact, that may even be a good thing because I stay focused.
mhm.
Sure. The
You
Love
know,
Sexy tour,
distractions.
Hucky, which
Huh?
which would technically, from a technical standpoint, that whole tour, that's the first time I actually saw Prince. Jay, you saw the Purple Rain tour. Unfortunately, I did not. Technically, that was a very difficult uh production to put on. In fact, they had two different sets. One would be at the next town that you all were going to go to. They had duplicates and everything like that. Compared to doing the Purple Rain tour, what was the difference between that and the challenges of executive protection for the Love Sexy tour?
The biggest challenge, Kurt, we didn't have the numbers. Um, Everything on Purple Rain was just blown out of proportion. It was crazy. I think we had 10 people in his security detail.
Wow.
And I haven't seen a security detail that big since then,
Mm.
Um, and so normally, um, for most for most tour details, you might have two, maybe four people if you're lucky, but you're never going to have 10 people. Prince, we had like 6 people. I remember just on him on the
Mm.
principal. That's rivals with government details.
Sure.
That's huge, and so Love Sexy was really the reality tour. This is like, oh, this is what really rock and roll life is about. You don't have this bottomless budget.
Sure.
uh, and you don't have all these resources. And we certainly felt it on the security end as well too. I
Okay.
mean, I feel like on Love Sexy there was just 4 of us. Yeah, I think it was like that thing because Gilbert at the time was no longer doing protection. I think that he was more Princess manager. My memory's kind of fuzzy, but I feel like it
Sure.
was Derrick Henry, Dwayne Nelson, myself, and another individual by the name of Renee Johnson. So the numbers had,
Okay.
reduced quite significantly.
That made it harder for you in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you
Yeah.
don't have the point case. So I talked to you about how important advanced work is. So
Yeah.
if I have people on my own team, people that I work with, people that I understand their working style, I understand their integrity levels, I could say, Kurt, I need you to go out and check out Club ABC tonight. Give me a report. Go to the payphone when you're done and tell me
A
what
payphone.
the payphone, right? Keep a bunch of dimes in your pocket, partner, uh, and let me know what's going on. If I don't have that, guess what? I have to trust somebody else. I have to call up the nightclub, or if I can get
Sure.
away, go visit the club for 15 minutes and say, let me talk to your security people, and and tell me a lot what's going on. So there's a difference. You can definitely still outsource that, but your comfort level is going to be very different as compared to having somebody from your own team doing this work.
It made me think while you're talking about all that is that when he would do these after shows, and sometimes they weren't necessarily arranged way in advance as much as the main venues that he's playing for shows. What was the level of stress or what have you with a oh, I want to play this club such and such and such. How much time did you or did you not have for advanced coverage of some of these after show gigs
Yeah.
that he would do?
So for us, Kurt and Jay, I actually like not having an advance notice, because think about it. If Princess does a last minute club, show, then not that many people know about it. But when you get, months in advance, you give people opportunities to plan for things. That's
Sure.
when, you're gonna have gray hair in your
Sure.
20s.
Look, you've had an opportunity to work with different organizations and different people, Secret Service, I would imagine, and other private security firms. What's the main difference for you um, when you're protecting, say, a celebrity or a CEO or a politician? Is there like a blanket blueprint for things you have to do, and then there's subtle nuances based on who you're protecting?
So the fundamentals of protection are the same. Okay, the fundamentals are the same. That doesn't change. The lifestyles and individuals, that changes a lot. So if I'm protecting a CEO that's a 55-year-old individual, his lifestyle is going to be very different than a 25-year-old entertainer. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So once we're done at the office and we get them at the house, the state security is going to take over, and I can pretty much be done for the day from working with an entertainer that's in their 20s. My day's not gonna probably start until late in the evening. I had a friend that had this chart basically on what the difference is over the years, but it's really pretty much, just their routines. It's obviously gonna be very different.
Mhm.
And celebrity protection isn't for everyone. Um,
Mm.
and I always, when people say they want to get in the field, I was like, well, what does that mean? Executive protection is general. It's that's just a vague term. There's a lot that comes underneath that umbrella. And so, what are you comfortable with? Are you okay with working at 3, 4, 5 in the morning? And seeing some activities that may go against your moral compass? If you're not, then maybe that's not going to be, the right fit for you to do celebrity protection. Not to say that you can't see some similar things in corporate setting, because I've seen some pretty wild things as well too. But in general, it's a lot different.
Okay.
That's an off the record discussion for another day.
Sure.
Sure. That's an after hours discussion, Hucky.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I'm sorry, Kurt.
no, I was gonna say your 9-year tenure working for Prince, you finally decided because you had this young child, you wanted to spend more time being a family man. Your what was your following assignment, if you will, following Prince? Was that your aunt who became the first mayor of Minneapolis, or was there somebody
No,
prior to that?
to be honest, I didn't do security for a couple of years. I was trying to figure it out, and I just needed to spend some time with my wife and my kid,
Sure.
and I didn't know what I was gonna do. I was just trying to find because all I knew was security, and so it took me a little bit to find my footing. I'll say that, but you know, I found that was my calling, and I figured out a way to make that happen. But it took years because it's like all I knew was close protection. And so I'm
Mm.
like, I don't know if I want to do this because I was thinking about traveling and being away from my family. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do anymore.
Sure.
But can you talk about training other protectors? Your methodology, how you take them through, how you try to get them to understand it the way you did and the way you lived it.
Yeah, this is a couple simple things, believe it or not, the first thing that I talk to people about is how do you feel about customer service? And I always get these weird looks. It's like customer service. So yeah, customer service. So there are operators, Jay and Kirk, that don't necessarily work celebrity protection, and a lot of my colleagues who do work celebrity protection, we kind of like get a smile on our face. But over the years, I've heard these guys on LinkedIn or Facebook, it's like I would never carry somebody's bag, and and the reasoning is valid. Obviously, if you have your hands full of stuff, it's very difficult to protect yourself and your client. But the reality is, man, tell Prince, tell Michael Jackson, tell Lenny Kravitz you're not carrying bags.
Mhm.
See if you're working with them long.
Right,
You're
right.
not. And so a willingness to really understand customer service. But here's the big thing I tell people about, because people think that protection is these supersized, huge guys that all they do is move people around. And really that's not the case. Successful protectors are people who can think quickly on their feet and are problem solvers. You are a problem solver. And so if you can't do that, if you're not, if you're a person, I had a friend that worked with me for years, and she was a solid practitioner, but she had a real issue with getting things thrown at her last minute. And I said, this probably isn't the profession for you, because it just drove her crazy when we put together an itinerary of what our principal was going to do. And then the principal was like, you know what, scratch that. I don't want to do that. And she's like, I can't, I'm losing it. And it's like, well, doing celebrity protection, that's probably not going to work for you. Maybe you need to try to focus more on doing corporate. And
Mhm.
even with corporate, there's going to be changes because you have individuals there that they have the right, and they make changes. It's like, no, we're going to do this and do that. And so the first thing that I try to do is really, Jay, is there's a lot of misconceptions, about what protection is and what it's not.
Mhm.
But if you are a good communicator and you're a good problem solver, you know what, you probably have some of the skills that you need to move forward. Not all of them, but some.
You have to have a ability to adapt and quickly
Yeah.
adapt if necessary, and that and not everybody's equipped for that.
And Kurt, like I said, you have to figure out problems. You know what? You're at the back of a venue and the stage door is locked and there's 30 people there that are trying to get at your principal. What are you going to do? Figure it out. And I will tell you with Prince, if you couldn't do that, then you weren't around long. And not this was a protector. Prince needed people that could think quickly, you know. And so certainly in this industry, you have to be able to do that, because Murphy is going to rear his ugly head and the problems will come. And if you don't know how to adapt, then there's gonna be issues.
Is the community, Hucky, of protectors a close-knit community?
Yeah, for sure.
All,
Yeah. Yeah,
because
because we're behind the scenes. We're all not. It's just like law enforcement. There's a
Mm.
brother, you know, and you know, and because we know what it's like, what it's like to protect somebody, you know. And so yeah, there definitely is a brotherhood for sure.
Yeah, very few people understand what you do. So when you get somebody who's a part of your tribe, so to speak, there's an unspoken language that, you get each other. Yeah. I mean, that's
It's funny you say that. I've been writing articles and I tell you, man, I get people to have just as much interest as like, wow, I had no idea that this was involved in protecting Prince or anybody. And and they're truly fascinated
mm,
about that life. I get people to reach out to me and say, man, I'd love to learn more about that. And so, yeah, because we, as individuals, we all have our own perceptions on how we think things are. And sometimes that's quite different from what reality is.
Right. Hucky, when it comes to the relationships that you formed over the years, I mean, not even just, in the Prince community, but, for other people that you were protecting, what's the main thing that you take away from all the years that you've been in the industry?
That's an amazing question, and it's a great one. I didn't work with a whole bunch of other artists. I worked with a couple, but you know, most people that I work with were part of the Prince camp, and I did some one-offs with other celebrities. Um, but I talked to people like Craig Rice and Alan Leeds who work with a lot of people. And everybody that I talked to, as a matter of fact, we were having a PRN reunion um, gathering tomorrow, Saturday, September 14, 2024. And I'm just amazed at how many people from not only across the country, from all over the world that are coming into Minneapolis for one day, maybe two at the most, just to see people that they used to work with. And so when I talked to Alan and other folks, they say that there was something that was very, very unique and very special about people who spent time working with Prince. Now, I will say this and give you this caveat is that I was young, and then sometimes you hear the term young and dumb, but there was a time where I honestly believed that I would have worked for Prince for free. And now that I'm older, I know that I was out of my mind. But anyway, it was because I had this closeness, and I still see that today. Um, and so it was a very magical time. Um, Jay, I don't really know how to answer that. I know what Harlan's values are. I don't associate with people that don't have integrity. I don't associate with people that don't have loyalty. I don't associate with people that are not kind. Those are just very strong. That's a very strong part of my belief system. And so I'm sure that there are people who work with Prince that don't feel that way, but somehow I was able to connect with some amazing people, and I still are friends with them today. So I don't know.
That's wonderful.
wow. So you were number four,
Number
right?
four, one, two, three,
Right?
four.
Right. So how many of the executive protectors are going to be at this gathering? And have you met all of them that are going to be there?
I have not met all of them. There's over 22.
Right.
Um, I put together a list, Kurt, several years ago. Because like, and once again, it was a great conversation piece because people like everybody assumes that because Chick is the most visible because of the movie and stuff like that. But a lot of
Right.
people assume that Chick was Prince's first bodyguard, and he was not. It was a guy by the name of Rosie. And so last I heard, he's somewhere in Missouri. But there's some that I know that I personally brought on, and so I am in connection with them. And there's a couple that came after me that live here, and we occasionally do stuff. And I'm glad you brought that question because there's one person that's coming to my mind that's not on social media, and I need to reach out to him tonight to see if he's going to be there because I'd love to see him. He lives local. He's a really amazing guy.
Cool. Cool. And you have an upcoming event through PRN alumni that you were going to talk about?
So I have a friend, Eric Rogers,
Paisley
that,
five and dime.
yeah, he's like, I just want to do something for the alumni. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I said, but I don't have a lot of energy and a lot of time to like really be involved. We did something in 2016 with Jackie Thompson, and
Right.
it was a big event. And I'm like, I don't have that energy and I don't have the resources. So if you can work with that, and to Eric's credit, he did. And so we got this thing that's going to happen tomorrow. And now, last 48 hours, I've been getting calls from all kinds of alumni and people. Hucky, you should do this. Hucky, have you thought about this? You should do this. And so I'm like, okay, okay, okay. Here's what we're going to do. Those are great ideas. Here's what I would suggest. Let's put together a committee,
Mm.
and you guys can share. Okay. You can share in the responsibilities on doing
Right.
that. But one friend did say something um, that made a lot of sense. So this thing we're having tomorrow is just for the alumni. It's just for people who actually work with Prince. You know, a lot of people have over the years, like, what an elitist attitude or something like that. And, that's not the case. It's just like these are people that were very special that we want to spend some time. But Prince's fans meant an awful lot to him. They really did. And so I I said, how about this? There has to be a way that all of us can do something together. Okay, there has to be this way. And so one of the things that I said that I would have some interest and I would use all my resources that I would have is to do an event yearly for as long as we can, to where fans and alumni could come together and we could just share experiences, we could just share memories about Prince. And we could do it in an environment that was enjoyable for all. I mean, be real honest. I have no desire to do any more events at First Avenue, to go out to Paisley. And there's nothing wrong with those venues. Those are great places. But, I just thought it would be so much better if we did like a cruise. And I got some really cool names that I'll share with you guys when we get off this. I don't want to put them out there yet because I don't want to steal the idea.
Sure.
Um, to get people together and just have a celebration, and for fans to, just like you guys have had an opportunity to spend time with me in my space. I just think it would be
Mhm.
cool if we could create an environment to where fans could do that.
Sure.
I'm much more interested in doing something like that than
Mm.
every year to try to be the main focus on putting together a PR and alumni deal.
It's
Fantastic.
great. Well, if it happens, the electric Bible will be there, right, Kurt?
Kentucky Bourbon Trail.
That would be my number one choice. I don't know if everybody feels that same way, Kirk, but
I thought Jackie liked her bourbon too.
Jackie and Ingrid have started their own tequila company. Did you know that?
What?
Yeah.
No.
I will send you a link. Yeah,
Oh, shoot.
I had heard, and they got their own business. They're in business together. And I'm like, good for them.
Nice.
Well, perhaps we need to get her on to talk about that.
You should reach
Talk.
out to her.
We will talk after off the air about that. That's cool. I'd love to hear about that.
So, Hucky, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. We really, really do appreciate. We're grateful for
Yeah.
your time. We're grateful for the experiences and the stories. We've had an amazing time.
Yeah, I just want to share this in closing here. This is easy. This is fun. And it's that way because I've got an opportunity to spend time with you guys and to get to know you. And I always share this with individuals, like get to know the individual first. And if you're willing to do that, then everything else that you want will fall into place. But when you leave with, what was Prince like?
Mhm.
What did he like to do? Then that can be a turn off.
Sure.
So appreciate you guys a
Appreciate you
lot.
back, Hucky. The two times we've been able to hang out in a limited capacity,
But we have
I
many
was gonna
more to
say,
come, right?
I appreciate you letting an old man ramble.
oh, please. You are the guest.
The
They don't want to
rambling
hear from
going
us. They
on.
want to hear from you.
Right.
My granddaughter's over here making all kind of faces at me. So she says something that was so funny because they have no idea about Prince. I think she kind of has an idea on, okay, yeah, he was this big guy in the music scene, but there's no relevance there. And And my wife said something tonight that was kind of interesting. She said, well, how does anyone know that you're legit? I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? How would they know if you or anybody worked for Prince? I was like, well, that's pretty easy to figure that out. And then my granddaughter's like, yeah, how would you do that? I was like, well, you could Google me. I said, but before then, all you got to do is look at I got credits on his albums.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. It
I
was this
remember seeing your
odd.
name in the Sign of the Times concert movie.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
He was in the
there's
Purple Rain.
pictures, there's
Over.
videos, but it was just that's the kind of conversation I have around my house. I live with two girls, so yeah,
It's
it's
not all glitz and glamour, right?
right
no.
for sure. So
Well, Hockey, thank you again for coming on with us and spending your time on a Friday night with us on Friday the 13th, no less.
no, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And people, believe in those superstitions. I don't. I'm just glad I had the day off though.
Thank you
But
guys.
if you like what you see in here, and Hockey, if you have any links that you care to share with us, we will put that in this episode once it's
Sure.
up and running.
Yeah,
Um,
Bodyguard Careers is where you can connect with me. That's my website. It's focused on close protection articles. And for those of you that may not know what that is, check it out. You may find something that's interested and learn things that you can either use in your personal life to protect you and your family, but also you may find something that's just fascinating. And you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn page. I don't do a whole lot on Facebook, but LinkedIn's my preferred social media platform.
cool. All right, folks, if you like what you heard and you saw, make sure you hit the like button down below and make sure you subscribe. And with that, Jay, can you take us out?
Yes. Well, once again, Hucky Austin, thank you very much for your time. And listen, y'all, remember, when the universe comes knocking, make sure you answer that door. Peace.
Peace.